do the math. I'm 18 right now, so I'd be 10 years old back then.
Fear of losing friends has become more of a reality for me.
My greatest fear right now is growing up.
I think at that time, I felt like I needed to figure out everything in order to make the next step forward.
There's like nepo siblings. They're not just nepo
siblings.
there's not just nepo babies.
That. Yeah. Hello, soju shotties, and welcome back to another episode. It seemed like you wanted to say something.
Of Soju with Sarah.
You're gonna say and Juicy J's, right?
Yeah, I was gonna welcome my Juicy J's in so they don't feel excluded. Yeah.
Yes.
Hello to all of you.
Apparently, last time we asked the audience what the subset of Juicy J's and intersection with soju shotties is. I don't even know how this question even is formed.
This probably sounds like nonsense to any new viewers, but I think people are saying Juicy J's are a subset of soju shotties. So really, you already shouted them out, but
you want to like explicitly shout them out.
Exactly, explicitly, like with the F word. Use some explicit language.
Welcome to another episode. Today's episode, we took a little bit of a poll on our Instagram soliciting some topics from you guys. And a common theme seems to be around adulthood and growing older and growing up and just how to navigate that. I think we talk a lot about like life and adulthood on this podcast. And so I think that's a good intermediary. So that's going to be the topic of today. But before that, has there been anything eventful that happened this week to you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to ask you how you've been feeling lately, but I feel like whenever I ask people questions, it's because I have something in mind that I want to talk about too, but I want to hear what they think too of themselves. I was going to ask you what you've been thinking about or how you've been feeling recently.
Oh.
And I'll just answer my question first.
Oh, you wanted to answer that for yourself.
So
okay.
I'm just laying it up to myself, actually. I've been feeling accepting of my flaws recently.
Okay.
Because you asked what happened that was eventful recently. Something that we haven't told on this podcast before is my clumsiness, because I was in this very living room where I had a bowl of leftover ramen soup and I was going to take it to the dishes.
Yes.
And then I spilled it all over myself.
I watched it happen in real time.
It literally happened in slow-mo.
It was so crazy how it unfolded, because Moose was at the corner near the door and James was walking very slowly towards the corner where you have to curve around into the counter. If you guys watch my like main channel videos, you'll know what the layout of our apartment is. But as he was turning, he stepped in slow motion onto this like bed sheet that was on this mattress that we had in our living room, which now I feel like the story is getting so complicated.
May I paint the picture a little more?
Yeah.
So here we are watching Mamma Mia 2 on the TV.
Oh, yes, we were.
And I was eating my ramen. She was eating ramen. I finished and I was like, well, let me take it to the sink, before I forget. And we had our like mattress, because we're in between mattresses right now. So we had one in the living room before we could take it out for the trash pickup. So we had that there. And then as I was walking over that bed to get to the kitchen, my foot caught on the bed sheet on the mattress. And then I caught myself actually. Yeah. But then there was an ice cube on the floor that was like Wait, melted a bit.
This makes it sound like we're living in like some random imaginary room.
Well, it was literally like Tom and Jerry like cartoon. You know what I mean?
Like the fact that there's a random ice cube on the floor is so funny to me.
Okay, well, it's not random because I glossed over that detail, but sometimes we give Moose like a little ice cube to play with because he likes to slap it around. But basically, I caught myself actually when I tripped, but then I tripped onto the ice cube.
Yeah.
Or like the puddle of water with the ice cube. And then I like in slow-mo, I was like, whoa, basically. And she just saw me like just very slowly, like just limbo, like the limbo dance thing.
Oh, yeah.
Do. Just the Matrix.
Your face going down was so funny because the whole time you were just in shock, but like in slow motion. So he's like,
yeah, but just my mouth just fully open, just what is happening? Yeah. Anyways, that was really embarrassing. I got it all over my clothes, on the floor, onto Moose. We had to like clean Moose up. I felt so bad for him.
We did clean up Moose.
But that was a really good exercise in just accepting my flaws, that I'm clumsy sometimes, and also just feeling thankful that you weren't. You could have been a lot more annoyed at me and you weren't. So thanks for that.
Yeah. My motherly instincts kicked in. I was like, oh my God, are you okay? Oh my God, Moose, are you okay? And then immediately went to work like scrubbing.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you for doing that.
Of course.
You're not scrub daddy, you're scrub mommy.
Oh,
Anyways, sorry, you have to follow up with that. I don't know if you have any anecdotes or feelings about how you are recently, or any eventful things that have happened recently.
I've been going through it. I think, okay, so for people that follow me outside of this podcast, I've been on like a little bit of a work break, a sabbatical, and it's been most of the summer, which has been really great for me, and I feel very refreshed. So I went back to work recently, but I think I've just been going through a lot, and I cut my hair, but it's kind of growing on me. And James called me out this morning when I said I kind of like my hair. He was like, "You are so Gemini."
Well, I was just like, an hour ago you told me you hate your hair, and then now you're saying you love your hair, and then the next hour she says I hate my hair. So which one is it?
Well, right now I hate it, but tomorrow morning I might like it.
Well, I love it. So
thank you. Today we're drinking some rice water or
rice water. It sounds like we just boiled some rice and then now we're just like drinking the rice water.
I feel like that is essentially what this is. Although, what do they add in addition to it?
So this is rice milk. It's called achim hessar, which is in Korean, it's just like morning rice milk, I think, or rice drink. I think after you boil the rice, you use the leftover like rice water, and then I think you add milk and then some sweetener to it or something.
Oh, okay. It's pretty good. We got it from H Mart, and I just wanted to try it, but James said something funny afterwards. He said that he has a tendency to like old people drinks. Is this for elders?
I think more elderly people do drink it in Korea or something.
Because
I drank it in Korea once, and my cousin was like, "Why are you drinking that? That's like for old people or old people like that stuff." So I feel like I do have a palate for that. So
okay,
yeah,
nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with it. Should we try some?
Yes, I already tried some actually. It's really good. Cheers.
Cheers.
Today's episode, we wanted to talk about growing older and the fear of getting older. I think there's a lot of life transition that you go through in your 20s, especially when you're transitioning from college age to adult age. But we also wanted to talk about the transition from high school to college, which is a lot of the times the first time that you leave home and you have to experience life on your own, quote unquote, on your own. So I think there's like two different life transitions that happen when you go from high school to college and then college to adult.
Yeah. And then, I don't know, many more transitions, but I think those are the biggest ones that we've faced so far, probably. Yeah. And I also think based on comments and I think our viewers, it seems like probably relatively relevant for them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I thought it'd be cool to talk about.
That's something that I'm curious about because I know a lot of you guys are in your 20s too, but I also know that some of you guys are not in your 20s. So if you guys are open to it, please comment your age in the comments below. I think a lot of our topics center around our own lives and our age, which is around the 20s, but would love to hear where everyone's from and what age everyone is.
Yeah. And I know we talk a lot about our 20s, and we also talk about our past a lot, so I don't want it to necessarily feel to the viewers like we're always living in the past.
Yeah.
But I thought it'd be fun to maybe just think of this episode as lore about us and just our backgrounds and stuff, just talking about our histories and stuff like that. And then maybe you guys will also find value in it in terms of relating to how we felt in terms of growing up.
Yes. I know right before we were talking about this episode and what we wanted to talk about, but you had mentioned that you wrote a little journal entry during this time. I don't want to put you on blast, but I would love to hear more about it because I briefly skimmed it and I feel like you went through so many common feelings that people go through at that age.
Yeah. I'm happy to share it. And lo and behold, it's almost like we talked about talking about this beforehand, and I have a prepared note of it. So I'm not going to share every single detail that I wrote in the journal, but this journal is from July 21st, 2016.
Wow.
And so that would put me at, do the math, I'm 18 right now, so that'd be 10 years old back then. Just kidding. I'm 27 now, so that would mean I was 19 back then when I wrote this. And I thought it was just really on topic basically because we're talking about growing up, the fear of growing up, and I have a journal entry literally about that. So just for context before I read this, I think it'll be interesting to compare where I was back then and where I am now, and also do the same for you. But basically I was right after my first year of college during the summer doing a summer internship abroad through this program that I did. And I think I was feeling a lot of anxiety about the job because it was my first big boy internship thing.
Yeah.
Not that I hadn't worked before because I did work during high school, but this was a real I felt like an adult
internship.
Yeah. This was I was working at a nonprofit organization in an office setting,
Yeah.
not like doing, the things I was doing in high school. Here's my journal entry. Okay. My greatest fear right now is growing up. Ever since I was 4, my biggest responsibility was doing well in school. So far in life, my hardest job and responsibility has been being a student. Sure, college is hard, but as I'm on the 4th week of my internship, I've been realizing how terrified I am of these new responsibilities and matching the expectations of my coworkers. I know for a fact that if I never really grew up, stayed in my hometown, and worked odd jobs for the rest of my life, I would be completely unfulfilled. I'll be bored and restless, so I know that I need to grow up and work through the pains involved in the process. But it's still hard. It's hard to fathom that the old days of childhood are slipping away, and my worries will continue as I increase in age. I'm afraid I'll choose the wrong major, and I'm afraid that I'll choose the wrong career. I'm afraid I'll waste my time doing something I'm miserable doing, and I'm afraid I won't be able to find the field and work that I love doing. So yeah, I know that was a very anxious sounding journal entry, but that's I think what I was feeling at the time. But I remember just thinking at that age of 19, I was like, I'm so scared to grow up, to be an adult. Like college still felt like being a kid, but as I got further and I did my first internship, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm so scared that I have to figure this out now. I don't want to figure it out now.
I feel like I tick off all of those worries because I worried about career. I worried about finding a partner and getting married. I worried about how fulfilled I would be, what I would be doing at my in my 20s. I worried about the friends that I would keep. A constant worry that I had all the time was that I wouldn't have my friends from school. And I just worried about losing those friends. I worried about not knowing what to do in life. That's actually very common because when I was speaking to my cousin over last weekend. Your
18-year-old cousin?
My 18-year-old cousin who's so young and bright and smart. I think I already said that. But she has all that.
Yeah.
But she was saying how she's so concerned about being in a major that will give her job stability afterwards. I think she was telling me about all the options and how one career would be a pipeline into this professional field. And that's why she wanted to pick that career, because it would be secure for a job from a job perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just remembering how I used to do that same sort of train of thought. If I do this right now, then the next step of my life would be this, and then the next step after that would be this, which is why I think I was so regimented about having kids and getting married at a certain age, because I felt
which you have not done yet.
Which I have not done yet. But I think at that time I felt like I needed to figure out everything in order to make the next step forward. So, and I think that's that's conditioned into the way that school treats things like internships and career progression, and even the career counselors that we had at school, I felt made it kind of hard for us to actually think about long-term career goals, because then the priority was most of the time, what are you going to do right out of college, right after college?
Yeah, I think there's a lot in there, but I think a lot of the career anxieties that happen when you're really young is you feel like if you choose a certain path, you have to stay on that path.
Yeah.
So it feels like such a monumental decision more than it actually is, because careers can be very winding roads. Actually, they usually are. And I think we talked in another episode about the average person has X many job changes, and it's kind of a lot.
Yeah.
And so I think people at that age, and me included with this, the reason I was so anxious about it was how would I know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? I don't even know how to do all these basic things I need to do for myself. So I think it feels such a big thing to do. And I think that's probably the pitfall that a lot of kids have, which is your major doesn't define what you do for the rest of your life. It is a stepping stone to what you want to get to, and you're going to figure that out. But yeah. I think I didn't realize that back then, which is why I was so anxious about it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I didn't realize a lot of things about career and what career actually looks like, is because I didn't have a good guide or mentor in that direction. And I know you have two older brothers, so I'm curious how much they guided you in terms of figuring out your life during that time. But for me, I felt like I relied a lot on my parents for information, and I didn't have someone to actually go for big sis advice or mentorship. And even now in adult life, I know you're supposed to have mentors. I don't think I have strong rooted mentors in my life, and I'm trying to figure out how I want to find more mentors. But I think having someone to kind of tell you what life is really important, because I realized sitting down with my cousin that I was just spieling different life lessons to her, even if she wasn't asking for it. And I think that's just my natural predilection to want to say things and tell her, don't worry about this, don't do this, don't.
You're like parenting her kind of.
Yeah, I'm like, you should take these Korean pills if you're going out to drink. Like, I was showing it to her
Oh,
because
really?
I had it on me and I was taking it. I was like, take a photo of this. Like, you're gonna get it off of Amazon. Which you guys should take too if you're gonna drink.
You're like, also make sure you find a really good guy like James. James is so perfect. He's so handsome. He's so smart. He's so funny. Did you tell her that? Oh, you did? Yeah. Good.
I'm kidding. I mean, no, I'm not kidding.
Yeah, why would you tell her that? That'd be really weird.
What was I saying? Oh, but
She was too stunned to speak.
I was too stunned to speak. But you have older brothers, so
yeah,
I'm curious if you learned anything from them.
Yeah, I think the feeling of fear in growing up, it is really class-based too, like you're saying, but that's the obvious one. It's like, yeah, you didn't have resources because you had less income as a family and your parents didn't have that experience working or going to college and stuff like that. But there's also privilege in terms of like what you're saying, which is
social privilege,
like
right?
Mentorship that you have. Maybe you were lucky enough to have a mentor that's like very invested in you.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily like your parents. That could be someone in the community that you've met who has taken a like investment in you as a person.
Yeah.
Or like in my case, my oldest brother went to the same college that I did, but 4 years ahead of me. So like as I was graduating high school, he was graduating college. So I think I did lean on him a decent amount in my early like freshman, sophomore year experiences, I guess, just to like know what clubs he did or like how hard is it to get into this or what classes did you take. And I think I took stuff from that. So I definitely had a lot of mentorship and privilege in that sense.
I think because I didn't have any siblings, I think there's multiple things that came out of it for me just in character development, but I do think I learned how to figure things out on my own. I want to say it's a good thing now, but at the time I feel like I just wish someone would just tell me what to do.
Do you feel like only children and firstborn children have similar struggles?
Yes. Unless, I can't really speak on the matter of like when you have a sibling and you're a firstborn child, but I do think there's some level of you're paving the way for everyone else, and so you got to figure out stuff first. I remember we just posted a advice column episode where someone was talking about being the eldest daughter and feeling all this responsibility and desire to take care of the family and then sacrificing a lot of themselves and their personal needs. And I feel like it's a similar experience where you're just trying to figure everything out on your own for the first time. And if you're coming from an immigrant family, it's like you're figuring out for your parents too, because they are, living their life for the first time too. Whenever I hear that, I just want to cry, because then I realize that my parents also haven't gone through a lot that maybe I've experienced in life at this point. But yeah, I think it's very similar. But I will say, if you have a sibling that's younger than you and you're the eldest child, but the sibling that's younger than you is younger by like a year, I feel like that's a scenario maybe where they have some level of at least like camaraderie when it comes to going through similar life experiences.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I could be wrong, because you have a sibling that's older by like a year, 2 years.
I mean, I can't speak for him, but I think it is, if you're pretty close in age and you're going through a lot of the same stuff, yeah, I imagine the burden is a little bit like spread out versus just like if you're like much older, Do
you think youngest children have it the easiest?
I think it's a mixed bag. It just depends on the family whether the youngest child has it easiest. I think generally speaking, probably that's the case. I feel like I've heard a lot of the time that just parents are a lot more lenient with the last child, because at that point they're kind of like, okay,
tired of it.
Yeah, we're like done being like what is it? I don't know, judge, jury, executioner or whatever, like they're just tired of being like the disciplinarian and like having to push their kids to do so much.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of like, as long as you turn out a good person and you are happy in life, that's all we care about.
Yeah.
I think that's how a lot of parents treat the last child, and then the older children always like, where was this when I was older or younger? Like, yeah. But I think generally it's tougher. I think it can be tough if you're the last child also, though, because maybe parents can be a little more checked out in terms of parenting. They're not as like invested in that sense, or maybe there's just more precedent for the older siblings, like they've done a lot.
Or maybe they're really strict because they're like, your older siblings didn't do the things we wanted to, so now you got to do it because you're the last one and you got to just fulfill all our
if their
prophecies.
older siblings are like, they messed up basically in life. Yeah, that could be true.
But not even messed up, if they didn't do what their parents wanted. Like, imagine you're a parent and you just want a doctor kid.
Yeah, then you feel pressure to like become that. Yeah, I think that's true. And then I think if the siblings are like pretty accomplished, I guess the last child would have a lot of pressure to like live up to that. And if they feel like they're not, then that's like they feel really bad about themselves maybe.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But yeah, I think there is a lot of privilege in there's like nepo siblings. They're not just nepo
siblings.
there's not just nepo
love
babies.
that. Yeah.
So like there's different levels of nepo siblings.
Yes.
So maybe I was a nepo sibling in a sense because my brother could tell me more about college. But I remember also just feeling maybe a little bit behind or disadvantaged in college when I was thinking about like different career things in junior year, like the third year of college, because once I got to campus that third year in the fall, everyone was like recruiting already and they had been networking for like months to get into these different firms. And I just got on campus and I was like, oh, I didn't know people were doing this already.
That's like in high school when you go into senior year and people have already applied to colleges, or junior year when people have already taken the SAT like once or twice.
Yeah. And you're like, I didn't know. I just
no one told me.
was,
Like, what's going on?
And so I was trying to figure out how these people knew about all these opportunities already and how they needed to like approach them.
Yeah.
And I realized, okay, there's like obviously there's nepo babies. They're like, and that's I use that term loosely, but these are like kids whose parents have already been in that industry, like whether they're in finance already, they're in tech already as like long-term like software engineers or like engineering managers or whatever it is. So they already know the game. Yeah. But I also realized there's like sibling stuff too, where if the sibling has already been to like business school or they've been already like in finance, they can just tell them the exact experience they had. And here's like, you need to go on Wall Street Oasis, read all this stuff. You need to like get this book, you need to like study, you need to do cases, all that stuff. I realized a lot of my friends had been getting that from their siblings too, which I had not been. So
yeah, well, I think about it now with my cousin because I feel the need to tell her everything and like what smart decisions to make, which I probably shouldn't, but I just, as like an older figure in her life, I see where I would feed her a lot of information about stuff I've gone through, and I think it would be useful. Hopefully she would want feedback from me. But yeah, I think for me at least, I think I was grateful in that I had a few friends who would share information with me. So I think my means of finding information about career stuff was my friends. But on the topic of like other non-career related experiences you go through for the first time in college, I had no idea how to approach dating. Because in high school and everything, I didn't really date. I had my first boyfriend at the very tail end of high school. But then I really didn't know how to like rizz people up. But I did it. I
rizz people up professionally?
I wasn't a paid rizzer at that time. Yeah. So
you didn't rizz all over
But now
people?
I'm paid to do that, you know?
Yeah. You get paid to rizz on people?
Oh, yeah. I think I just navigated like the dating experience and also friendship experience for the first time. And I think some of it comes with intuition. Like you just kind of feel out how to interact with people. But I'm curious if your siblings ever gave you dating advice, because I feel like that's something that you can learn a lot from an older sibling.
I don't think any of us have rizz, to be honest. So I literally did not learn anything from them. Yeah. Sorry, that's like not a great answer, but I don't think I learned any sort of rizz from them. And I don't think they learned anything from me either.
Also, your brother has a lovely wife now and a kid too, so he had rizz.
Oh yeah, he had rizz, but I didn't learn it at least.
Where'd you learn your rizz from?
Well, I didn't learn it from my brothers because I think it just comes so naturally to me. Like that's like asking someone, how did you become so tall? They just did, you know. They didn't like.
It's genetic.
It's genetic. It's God-given. It's innate. I can't teach it. I don't think I've ever had rizz, and I don't think I need to anymore because I have the ultimate.
But what did you want to say?
I won the ultimate prize.
This is a clear example of how you don't have rizz.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. My rizz is active listening. Insightful questions that are not surface level, and I bring it back. I relate other things that you told me before, and I bring it forward, and I'm like, oh, you said this earlier. This reminds me of what you just said, and therefore, what do you mean by that? And so I think that's my rizz, and anything beyond that, I'm not really good at.
I'm having such a fun time right now.
Yeah.
This all started because the jokes didn't land the first time, so I asked him to repeat it. But this is like the fifth take of this.
Oh yeah, I was trying to repeat the joke. Yeah, sometimes we have to do that.
The other day, we were talking to someone. I forget who it was. It was like one of our friends from college. And you had brought something up about like their siblings and their family. And you remembered literally to the dot, on the dot. What is the saying?
To the T.
To the T. You were like, oh, is your sister still dating that guy? And he was like, oh no, like, how did you remember that? And then I loved how the friend was like asking you some question like, oh, you have siblings or something like that, which is so funny.
There's a clip of me in
What?
another episode being like, I'm not going to be the listener friend anymore. And then I brought up the example of like when I would talk to people and then I'd bring up all these intricate details of their lives. And then I brought the exact example of when I bring up that I have 3 siblings. They'd be like, you have siblings? I never knew that.
Yeah, it
And
happened
in this
again.
exact scenario, last week, I was asking them about these intricate details that they had told me before. And then they followed up with, wait, do you have siblings? And I was like, yeah, I have siblings.
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
3 of them.
This is so funny. But I do think that's your rizz.
Active listening.
Active listening.
And recall. And recoil.
I was about to say that.
Of my gigantic booty.
That's not you. It's me recoiling from your rizz.
Oh, you're recoiling. Like your butt's recoiling?
Please, this episode is going down the drain.
Your booty's recoiling at me? Or from me?
What's happening? I don't even
What
want
were
to
we talking
continue.
about? All right, so we were talking about...
I was asking you about how to rizz... Or I was asking you about if your siblings taught you how to rizz people up.
Yeah, but we were talking about that in the context of nepo siblings and privilege and different levels of privilege. There's like so many different types of privilege. I'll hard pivot it into a more serious, grave tone.
Okay.
I think while we're talking about privilege,
yeah,
I think it is a high level of privilege that we can talk about this fear of growing up, because I think growing up implies like you were able to be a kid for a long time, and then once you hit the like standardized societal like transition point of the 18, you turn 18, then you go to college.
Yeah,
a lot of people, whether they grow up with like single parents or they have to like kind of raise their siblings or they have to like take on more for the family than most kids should have to, or they go through some traumatic experiences, they really do have to grow up way quicker and way earlier. They don't even get to think about how they want to grow up and when to grow up and what to do when they grow up.
Yeah.
They just kind of have to do it. So when it comes time to like the usual transition points, they're kind of already over, I don't know, they're maybe used to it more. So I think this episode in itself is a privilege that a lot of people have in the US versus other people that don't have it. Mm-hmm. And that they can even think about the fact that they can fear growing up.
Yeah. Obviously, it's hard to always give nuance to every single situation that we're talking to, but I think that's a very valuable point to make, that everyone has a different experience and the period in which you're growing up is different for everyone. And the experiences that you go through and the feelings that you go through are very different. And I think our experience does come from a place of privilege. And I do appreciate that you acknowledge that, because as much as I think we've had our fair share of like different experiences in our life, I do think we had a lot of blessings in our life too, whether it's coming from a 2-parent household, having siblings that you can lean on to, having a great college experience. I just think it's very important to note that you guys might or might not be resonating with this episode.
Yeah, it is very much a spectrum too. Like sometimes we mention the fact that we grew up low income and stuff, and I wonder and worry if people take that as a blanket statement so that we can justify like, we've had struggle and whatever, and like they look at us now and they're like, what do you have to talk about now or worry about? Like, that was like years ago. And it's true, it is years ago, and there's a lot of stuff like still from childhood that like affects our mindset. Probably that's what we talk about. But I guess we're talking about privilege, so I just wanted to mention that like we're aware of, I think the further you get away from your childhood and like these things that troubled you because you were more disadvantaged, like I think we still talk about those things because they're relevant for our lives, and I think they're relevant for other people's lives, which is why we talk about it. But I also don't want people to take it as if we're talking about it in a way that's like, we still have so many problems, and like everyone has problems too, but we're aware that we don't have as many problems as we used to because of that. Yeah,
I think something I've learned through this podcast is how it can impact you guys. Like I get so many DMs all the time about people saying I'm also a low income student and I've been going through so many similar experiences, and that's where I realized how much I really want this podcast to help have a positive impact on people's lives. And I think that's why we also linger a lot on the past, because I feel like that's where a lot of our experiences come from. But at the same time, I also don't want to be like J-Lo, like talking about
I'm from the Bronx. I'm a New Yorker, and everyone's like, you don't really come off that way.
Yeah, so I think we're trying to strike a good balance of this, but definitely in the episodes where we talk about our childhood, it's a little bit hard to stray away from that topic, but we do recognize how much privilege we have, especially right now in our lives, because we have stable jobs. We have a nice little apartment that's cozy with our nice little cat, and we have each other, and it's just a place where I'm very happy that I'm in. I do want to just say that we know that we are privileged people.
Yay.
This was a very long intermission segment.
Yeah, let's just consider this intermission segment.
Yeah,
but
that was a very serious intermission.
I wanted to bring it back to the general. I wanted to bring it back. I want a man in finance. Finance 6'5".
This episode's so funny to me.
Okay. I wanted to bring it back to the journal entry that I read earlier, because I think there were nuggets in the last part of it that I wanted to compare for ourselves back then, what we were thinking about and contemplating for our careers versus how we feel about it now. So what I said in the journal entry earlier, I said, I'm afraid that I'll choose the wrong major, and I'm afraid that I'll choose the wrong career. I'm afraid I'll waste my time doing something I'm miserable doing. I'm afraid I won't be able to find the field and work that I love doing. So I was curious for you, and then we can talk about for me as well. Do you feel like you chose the wrong major? Do you feel like you chose the wrong career? Do you feel you wasted your time in any way doing something that you didn't like?
I think that's a good question. And also to caveat, I know so many disclaimers and caveats. We talk a lot about career on this channel because I think that's one of the top 3 things that kind of like is in our heads at this age. But I do think at that time I did think about career a lot, especially the latter half of my college experience. I am grateful that I landed in the field that I'm in, because I do think at that time I was pretty naive about career options, and I really didn't have a good grasp on what would be the right career for me. And I kind of fell into it because my friends that I knew at the time were also doing computer science. And at that time, I think right now computer science is definitely not the hot field to be in, but at the time I think it was a pretty hot and relevant field, and I resisted it for the first couple of months that I was in school. But I took my first class. I quite enjoyed it. I thought first class in college, because I did take a class in high school, but I quite enjoyed it. And then I kind of just landed there because
what did you like about computer science?
Well, first of all, I think the introductory course was very visual. So a lot of the projects that we did were like visual projects. So creating the galaxy, right? Like, did you do that project? The one where you...
N-body,
yes. You try to like stimulate.
Oh, this is stimulating me.
You tried to simulate the movement of gravity. Wait, is that... I don't know if that's correct.
Something about Newton's law, I remember.
Yes. And then you create different fractal patterns to create different flowers and different shapes and things like that.
Just riveting.
We'll do an episode on just computer science.
Yeah.
One episode. I remember I was surprised, like very pleasantly surprised at how visual it was. And at that time, I really thought I would minor in art, but that was just not something that I ended up doing. I did take a lot of art classes though, but at that time I felt like it was a perfect fit for everything that I was looking for in terms of my desire to create something visual, and also my desire to be a little bit technical and also practical. There's one thing that my parents taught me to be, it's to be uber practical. And so I think that was the right choice for me in terms of helping me land in a career that I enjoy and also provides me a lifestyle that I enjoy too. Because one of my biggest fears actually going into college was not being able to make any money after college. I had no sense of how to make money, and the jobs that I did in college were all, like for the purpose of earning some income, but they weren't like
you mean like working in the dining hall?
Yeah, working in the dining hall, but also doing research, and these weren't things that I was planning to do afterwards.
So long story short, you don't really regret it.
I don't think I regret it.
Your career move so far.
Yeah. But what about you? Because you've made a few career transitions.
I think it's hard to say I regret it, because whether I enjoy the job I do now or not, I think the whole point of going to college for me and my family was like to get us to a better economic state. And I think being able to have these corporate jobs has allowed me to not just basically have income to help my family and myself. So I think it's hard to say that I regret it. And I think the framing of that back then was like a little bit just uninformed in terms of like, just, yeah, like we said earlier, it's like you don't just choose a job and that's your job forever. Like it could be that, but like you have leeway to like do different things potentially. And so I don't think I regret it. I think my frame of mind back then, if I remember, was I remember reading this essay. It's called The Opposite of Loneliness, and it was by this girl from Yale who had just graduated, and then she like tragically passed away in a car accident. But then her essay went viral and like got a ton of people reading it. And it was essentially talking about how her Yale classmates, she said it's like such a shame that they choose like only consulting, finance, and tech as their traditional career paths, and like she felt like there's so much more people can do with their lives. Not that those are bad career paths, but she felt like people kind of defaulted into it because that was the thing to do and they weren't exploring more. And so I think I read that earlier on in college, and I was so like, I was really influenced by that essay, and it's a great essay, but I think I was like
resistant.
I was really resistant. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I shouldn't pick consulting, finance, or tech. I feel like I'm really not going to enjoy it. Like, I don't think it's,
Yeah.
so I was so overly obsessed with picking something that I enjoy, that I thought would be impactful, that I also wanted to do, that also paid me money, which is like a lot to ask of a first job when you don't really know what you want to do. So I think as lovely and great as that essay is, and that people should go read it because I think it's a great essay, I think I index on that in maybe a different way, in that like I put a lot of pressure on myself back then to like have to figure out a career path that's not those traditional paths that most people go into after college, and then also find something that I really enjoyed and also made money. So
yeah, honestly, I think that's a really interesting interpretation of that essay, because on one hand, I think when it comes to career, it's hard to give flat out advice, because I think some people actually do enjoy these traditional big threes, which is consulting, finance, tech. Big three that we knew in school. I'm sure there's different big threes in other, like medicine, I feel like is in there too. But I think for some people, it is the right path, and like that is something that they enjoy. And I know a lot of friends who are doctors, and that's what their life calling is, and they care about helping people in the sense of helping rehabilitate patients. But I do think there's a lot of, you're very impressionable when you're a kid, and so when you see something, it will sway you one way or another. But I do remember when you were in college, you were so gung-ho about your passions and converting that into a career. And I remember how much difficulty you had trying to job hunt at that time, because you were really interested in music. And I forget if sports was on that list.
I think I had a really vague idea of what I wanted to do, and it was all relating to something artistic or like the entertainment industry or something arts related.
Yeah.
But it wasn't specific enough, and I didn't have industry experience or anything like that to fall back on, or connections. So I think I really struggled to like figure out what I really wanted to do. And so I think I ended up taking a more practical route, at least right out of college, because I was like, well, I don't really know what I want to do or how to get there. So let me pick something that will at least like give me optionality, and then like, you know, a decent enough paycheck.
So what would your advice be to someone who's in college right now that is maybe trying to figure out their career and weighing the traditional paths versus the non-traditional? Because I feel like I also don't want this episode to sway any student out there into the wrong direction too. Like maybe they were considering something non-traditional, but then they heard what you said and they're like, wait, I have to do like consulting, tech, finance now. Do you have any advice on that for someone going through it?
Yeah, man, I mean, the answer is always it depends. So let me caveat that. So let me give it for two profiles of people. For one profile of person, if you're pretty clear on like the non-traditional path that you want to do, and you really want to do it, like I think you should absolutely go for it, as long as like your financial situation allows it. I think you can spend a lot of time in the corporate world and it can be fruitful, but it can also be maybe a detour versus what you really want to do. And you might find that thing that you want to do later, like maybe 5-10 years down the line, and you might I really wish I had done this like 10 years ago. I think that's one profile of person. The other profile of person, I would say, if you are kind of waffling between non-traditional and like more traditional path, and you're kind of like, oh, traditional path's not like cool, or I don't think it'll be fulfilling, or it's kind of like what everyone does, so I don't want to do that. I would say like don't be afraid to do the corporate path or the traditional path, because it's life-changing for a lot of people to have that type of like stable salary that for the first time, you know, and like that's okay to want that, and it's really good to have a corporate job a lot of the time. So like if you want that stability, and then that will allow you to have freedom to figure out what else you might want to do, or maybe you end up just liking that path in general. Don't feel like you have to do the non-traditional thing just because, I don't know, you have this notion in your head that maybe it's less interesting or you might be less fulfilled or something, because I think it is a like truly good path to go down to.
I think that's good advice, because I think about, we have a friend His name is Sam. He's in the entertainment industry right now, and he's known since college that he's wanted to pursue this non-traditional route, and he networked his way up like crazy starting from college. And it's so great to see where he is right now because he's like us, like 27, but he's made so many leaps in his career because he knew for sure that he wanted to take this non-traditional path. And I think it's really fulfilling when you know what you want to do and you go after it, especially when you're young. And for me, I just didn't have a clear sense of what that was. So I'm very grateful for having a corporate job for so many years. I do think there is just a lot of experience that you'll go through as you work in your corporate job or non-corporate job that leads you to like the end goal and end state of things. And we're still figuring it out too, like trying to figure out what that is. But I do think on the topic of, what is the title? See, we're so bad at like sticking to the title or sticking to the topic that I literally can't even remember.
We should just have the title be like,
fear of
we're going to
growing up.
talk. That's it.
Yeah,
We're
actually.
talking.
I think on the topic of the fear of growing up, because we always take a detour down like career, because that's top of mind for us a lot of the time. But I do think there's a lot of fear that surrounds like leaving your family and especially relationships with your parents that kind of get lost when you're going into college or like the next stage of life. I think throughout my adulthood, I've noticed that I transitioned out of relying on my parents so much emotionally. And that kind of makes me a little sad sometimes because I know I don't call them nearly as much as I used to. And especially as you get busier in life, I have more and more of a fear of this relationship with my parents falling off and like shattering. And I'm curious if you feel the same way.
Yeah, I think the fear that I had with growing up, especially moving away from home, was as it relates to family, is just not having my parents to rely on anymore. That's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's just like the emotional stability, just knowing that they're taking care of the house that you live in. And at least for my parents, like they were determining like our schedules in a way, like
if anything happened, your parents are there to step in, right? When you're a kid.
Yeah, at least I can like ask them about it or talk to them about it and they can tell me what to do if I don't know. But I think when you go away to school, you're just kind of like, I don't know. You're not a kid anymore. I mean, you are,
have to
but
do everything yourself, you know.
Yeah, you start to have to figure it out yourself. So I think I definitely had a lot of that. But I think now it's more just like the fear of seeing them age and then you having to like take care of them a little more. And I think that's a lot of, I know that's a different conversation, but I think that's tougher.
Yeah. I think when I was a kid, I really didn't know how my relationship with my parents would change. And so when I was going through it in college and then leading into adult life, my fear of growing up went from career fears, like you had mentioned, into fears about how to maintain things in my life, including friendships, including family, including my personal interests and goals, just like how to maintain things. And so I was very fearful of losing stuff that I already had. And I think I've gotten over it a little bit in the sense that now that I'm older, I think friends come and go. And so the fear of losing friends has become more of a reality for me. But I think with family, it's always been a little bit fearful, like you mentioned, of seeing your parents grow older, because every time I go home, my parents are older and it makes me so sad. And now we have cats and they get older too. And just the lack of time that we have with our parents makes it very sad, you know, a little bit like makes you think about how you're spending time. Every time I go home, I do this analysis of my time and how I'm spending it and how much more I can optimize to go home. But I think it's really easy for that mindset to get lost when you're busy running around doing other stuff, especially in the city. So
there's an essay, it's like on this website called Wait But Why, I think. It's like a blog post, but I think it's pretty famous. He's basically talking about like how much time do you have left with your parents after a certain point.
Yeah.
And basically his point was that the vast majority of time that you'll spend with your parents are already over if you're an adult, because past the age of 18, you're going to see your parents potentially like twice a year. I think that's a lot of people's average. Maybe more if you're lucky, if you live in the same area. But basically he's saying like 90%, 95%, whatever it is, depending on where you are at in life, of the time that you have had 90%, 95%, whatever the number is, of the time that you've spent with your parents or will have spent with your parents in total, you've already done it.
Yeah.
So you only have like maybe 5% to 10% of the total time that you'll spend with your parents left in life, which is really hard to wrap your head around. It's kind of sad. And I think one, that's a good reason for you to like try to see your parents more. But two, I think it also just speaks to like that fear that people have of growing up is a very valid fear, because you just do have a lot less time with them.
Yeah. What do you think is the right way to handle this fear of growing up, because it just happens. Like you're kind of forced into growing up when you hit the age of like 18. And whether it's you go to college or you have to move out of your home, you're like just legally now not a dependent on your parents. What do you think are some ways to deal with that and grow up, but not struggle with the process of growing up?
I guess my perspective on growing up is that you kind of just realize that it is just a natural progression of life, and that it's not something that you should be scared of. And that's not to say like, why are you scared? Like, that doesn't make sense. It makes a lot of sense. Like, you should.
Yeah.
A lot of people are scared of growing up, and I was really scared of growing up too. Part of it is, like we said, because you don't necessarily always have examples for you, so you're not really confident about what might happen.
Yeah.
But I think the same reason in nature, like, you know, baby birds are pushed out of the nest and then they like end up flying, you know, like, maybe that sounds corny, but
oh, that's so cute
but
though.
there's just like,
yeah,
in nature, it's just like you just kind of grow up. You are a lion that's, you know, a cub, and then you kind of like get pushed out of like the pride, and you kind of have to like find your own way, right? That's just kind of how nature is. And I think that's the same for humans and people. It's like you kind of just progress, and like if you're just staying in the same position in life since 18 to like in your 30s, like I don't feel like you'll be happy. And I don't know, it's just not right for it's just not right for your life, right?
I think if you're not taking risk or not challenging yourself as a person in this period of growth, you'll not move forward. You know, like if you're not pushed out of the nest or you're not pushed out of the pride.
Yeah, but that's not to say like, I think a lot of people are scared of growing up because they have this sense of like, it's so fun being a kid, it's so fun having less responsibility, it's so fun being able to like hang out with your friends in a way that's more like stress-free, and you're just having fun. And I feel like that's something that we think as adults like we can't do anymore.
Yeah.
And like I really don't do well with this too. But it's just like the things that you enjoyed when you were a kid, you can still retain that, you know? You can still try to be like fun with your friends. You can still try to like make jokes and be fun loving in general. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's harder as you get older to do that, but I think trying to retain that sense of like childhoodness, or like being kind of like a child, not in a bad way, I think that's something to like strive for.
I also think a part of growing up is also having more responsibilities, and that's maybe one area too where people might be a little more fearful, because I definitely was not. I'm going through it because every year in your life more things start happening and more things you have to take care of. But I just think like I'm still scared of all the responsibilities that are incoming, and including raising a family and having to care for my parents when they're older, and having to have marital issues. Not that we will, but like it's just all things that start plaguing you more and more. And that's part of being scared of growing up, is like being scared of all the obligation and responsibility that's coming. But like you mentioned, I think it's a natural progression of life. And I think the best way that I always preach about approaching things is to look at things optimistically. And so even yes, maybe there might be more responsibility and more obligations, but there's also more things to learn. And if I'm comparing myself now to myself from 10 years ago, the amount that I've learned, I had this realization recently, because I was like, wow, when I was 18, I felt like I knew everything. I felt like
You felt like you knew everything back then?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like I felt like ethically, I was like, my moral compass was correct. I felt like I knew how to socialize with people and talk with people, when I just realized that back then I was just a severe people pleaser, and that's why I felt like I connected with people, because I was just so people pleasing. But it's just like all these reflections I make now, because I've gone through years of trying to make friends, and I'm sure when I'm 40 and 50 and 60, I'll have even more wisdom to like reflect on how I was when I was in my 20s, and maybe I'll reflect on how I was on this podcast and have reflections about how, oh, I was so like insecure or so this or that. But I just think like comparing myself now to then, there's so much I've experienced that I'm really glad I experienced. And so on the positive front of having more obligation and responsibility, I feel like I've become more of a developed person. Like in terms of my ability to handle situations and ability to navigate difficulty in my life, I'm just so much better at it. And in the past, it's just I didn't have the experience to really teach me these life lessons about how I should act in front of people, how I should appreciate certain things in my life, how I should, you know, be a well-rounded adult, which I'm still not. But
yeah, I think that reminds me of what people say where it's like, yes, your problems grow as you age, but you also get better at dealing with them, and you like adapt. And so I think that's what you've probably gone through a lot, which is you've progressed a lot as a person, and you're never going to let go of this feeling that you're scared of the next stage of your life, because if it's new, you're going to be scared of what's going to happen because you just don't know what it's going to be like yet. But I think the more life you live, you kind of just realize that like, oh, I've already gone through seasons of change in the past and I've dealt with it just fine. And like knowing that, it's easier to go into new seasons of change, knowing that you've handled stuff like that in the past. It's always changed and you have to deal with it, but you just get better at it and you adapt to it.
I think something I'm also trying to teach myself is to let things be okay. As in, I think that's a bad way to describe it. But there was this Reddit comment I was reading about, it was like a life lessons Reddit subreddit. And one of it was like, you can't control the things that happen to you or how people react to you, but you can control your reaction to things that happen. And so I've been taking that really seriously because lately I've been feeling a lot more negativity in my life, whether it's online. I think I get affected a lot by negative comments sometimes that people leave, and also in life when I feel like a lot of things have been going wrong in my life lately and it's been ailing me a lot, and I tend to just sit and feel all the emotions of like this negativity. It really hit me that I really haven't learned how to really process my reaction to things, or like control my reaction to things. And I've been trying to teach myself how to just react more positively to things, whether it's something bad that happens in life or negative situations I'm thrown into. I think as you get older and as you age, there is the fear of things going wrong and like not having this, not having that. But I think what I've learned is every path is a path and it takes you down another path. And I was literally telling my mom this the other day. I was like, on the topic of career, I talk about my career a lot with her too. I was like, even if something happens with my career right now, whatever path I take next is going to be the door to another path, and it'll just keep taking me down different paths. If I'm driving on this long highway and it's just a straight line, but I continuously see like side roads that I can go down, and I've been driving down this path for like years, I might just be interested in taking another path. Like I might just be interested in turning right and seeing where that takes me, even without an end goal in mind. That might take me to somewhere where I'm really happy or something new or something exciting, but I won't know until I take that path. And so I think that's just what growing old is just taking these random side quests and side paths and trying to figure out where your life ends up without having a really clear idea of how exactly it's going to turn out.
Yeah, I think there are like seasons of stability, there's like seasons of change, but I feel like in general, if you're only comfortable all the time, you're not gonna be growing like you want to be. Yeah, and like I said, you're not always gonna have to be growing, but I think in general you do want to put yourself in situations where you're slightly uncomfortable so that you grow more. One word of advice to the James from 10 years ago, maybe don't watch so many coming of age movies. And that sounds really hypocritical, because in an episode about feeling lost in your 20s, I gave some film recommendations about talking about basically movies do help you feel less alone in your struggles, and seeing people go through the similar things that you've gone through or articulate thoughts that you've had that you thought maybe no one else was going through can be really like nourishing for your soul and just like help you feel less alone. That is all true. However, as it relates to this topic, I think because I used to watch so many coming of age movies to try to like relate to it, I didn't have enough life experience back then to fully grasp what they were putting down. I wasn't taking my life and relating it to that perspective. I was taking that like those movies, and then extrapolating it to my own life. So I feel like I felt everything as if it was like a movie in my life. And I was like, if this happens, XYZ might happen. And like I've seen this in the films before. This is not my first rodeo.
Had like a map
in these movies. They're always so scared of growing up and they're so scared about the next step, and it's such a dire thing.
And if you start dating this type of person, you'll end up in a divorce.
Exactly. And then it's always like, I never want to grow up, like blah 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 blah. And then the moral of the story by the end is like, I don't know, like you don't need to grow up or whatever. Something like that. Or like it's such a winding road in that movie, and the whole thing is just them not wanting to grow up. And then by the end, maybe there's some story of like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
But I feel like because I watched so many of those movies, everything that was happening in my life, I was just so like, it just felt so dramatic for some reason. Like it had to be done right, or else like my life would turn out poorly or something like that. So, you know, to my 17-year-old, 18-year-old self, maybe just don't watch so many movies, and maybe you won't treat your life so much like it's, you know, a film or something.
But on the topic, do you have any movie recs? If
This episode was originally about the fear of growing up. I feel like we rambled a lot in this episode about we did talk about how we grew up. We talked about the fear that we had in growing up at times. However, I don't think it was very cohesive. So there's some sort of ambiguous topic that we can give about growing up. I don't know if it's going to be the fear of growing up or something else.
But in the same way that growing up is just taking all these detours and navigating different roads, this episode has taken so many detours.
That's a great artistic interpretation. The structure that we had in the episode is much like the experience of growing up. Therefore, you should feel that in our structure, not through just the words that we say.
Exactly. You should ask Moose if he has a fear of growing up.
Oh my gosh. Moosey, do you have a fear of growing up? I don't know if that's yes or no.
You did your Moosey voice right before that, which is so funny because you were like, I'll never show my Moosey voice to the audience. You were like, Moosey, do you have a fear of growing up?
Please do not include that. I beg you, please do not include my Moosey voice.
Or you can blackmail you with that.
It's literally automatic. I blacked out when I was talking to him and I didn't realize I was using my Moosey voice.
I feel like this episode's going to be like 30 minutes of substance, but then bloopers. And then it's like another like 30 minutes. Anyways.
How am I supposed to talk to him? Like, hello, Moosey.
That's another Moosey voice you do.
I don't do that. Hey, Moose, how do you feel about growing up?
So some parting words of wisdom.
I think it just gets better with time. I can't pinpoint one specific moment or experience that made me be like, oh, I'm not scared of being an adult anymore. But I think gradually over time, you just realize that you are capable of getting through things and like learning. But I think more practical advice would be, I think finding mentorship can be really good. And I know that sounds really like generic. And whenever people would tell me that before, I'd be like, okay, but how do you find a mentor?
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily have the best, I guess, rules or guidebook on how to do that. But I do think it's good to just like reach out to people that you admire yourself.
Yeah.
And you don't have to view it as like networking or something. Truly, I think people are open to talking to you. Not all the time, but if you reach out to enough people and you're just like, hey, I really admire what you do. I just want to learn about what you do. I don't know. Whatever you're curious about, just think of people or look up people online, whether that's on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever. I think it's worth trying to talk to those people and like get sort of mentorship from them. And just mentorship can be a lot of different things. You can literally just ask them questions and maybe they'll like respond to you with some answers, you know?
I was just about to say mentorship doesn't mean it has to be anyone older than you. I feel like I get a lot of mentorship from friends who are like similar ages as me, but that they've gone through some phase of life that I haven't gone through yet. Like I have a friend who's married. I think she tells me a lot about married life and that kind of situation that I think Moose is taking over the screen right now. But I just think there's a lot to learn from people our age and sometimes people younger too. I feel like they have sometimes words of wisdom to share. But mentorship doesn't have to be, like you mentioned, a very rigid thing. It doesn't have to be a professional thing. It doesn't have to be about career.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I also think the other thing that I wanted to say is don't be afraid of taking risk when you're growing up. And I think that's another like blanket statement, like very broad and very generalized. But I just think about all the times that either people I know or like myself, how often a risk has paid off. Another parting wisdom is if you're going through this stage of life and growing older and you're kind of fearful of things, I just want to say don't be scared of new things that come into your life. And don't be scared of taking on new opportunities and new challenges because challenges are what make you grow. And I think about how you talk about your beginnings in sewing, and it's because you went to this one workshop where you learned how to sew for the first time. And that's literally how your whole interest in like creating garments and creating clothes and starting a brand came about.
Maybe like another version of saying that, it could be just like what you are now doesn't define what you are for the rest of your life. Because you can pick up new things and you are a dynamic person. Like everyone is a dynamic person.
Yeah.
And so you could be a late bloomer, but also maybe you have a lot of stuff figured out now, but that doesn't mean you are going to only have to do that for the rest of your life. And so I think making these decisions early on can feel so dire and so like life altering. And it is life altering, but you can always figure out ways to change your path. And what you choose now is not what you choose forever. It's just like where you start out. So I think taking a little bit of the graveness or seriousness out of that decision can help. And it is a really big decision. But if you're someone who's so anxious about that, that's maybe like you can maybe dial it back a little, just knowing that many people make career changes even like 1 to 2 years after they come out of school and they're like, I want to do something different.
Yeah. But anyways, any more
Oh wait, I was
thoughts
gonna say one
to
more
share?
thing. Give me like 10 seconds. I can't think of it. I lost it.
It's okay. If you think of it, we can just interject it in the middle. You'll be like wearing something completely different. Anyways, I think James can't think of the last great point that he had.
I promise you is really good. So maybe comment as if I did say something really profound at the end, and that will make me feel better because I had something really great to say, but I just really can't think of it now. So I'm so sorry.
I'm going to go onto my account and just comment, wow, that was so profound and amazing.
Yeah,
James.
maybe just say like, that last parting wisdom was so profound. I cannot believe you thought of that. Yeah.
Yes.
Word for word, maybe.
There's going to be like 20 of those.
20 of those are going to be like, these are
comments.
bots just commenting this. But it would make my day if you guys said that, just to make me feel better about forgetting it. Yeah.
Well, if you remember it, you should just post it as a pinned comment.
Oh, just with my
on the
profile?
thing.
Yeah. Maybe I'll do that.
Anyways, every episode just ends up being super like introspective, but I hope that was at least remotely helpful for some of you guys who might be a little bit anxious and fearful of growing up. I know we still have our own anxieties around growing up, but it is all just a journey that we have to go through. So I hope it was helpful. And as always, thank you guys for listening. Please rate us on Spotify.
For the love of God, please.
Tone change.
Yeah. Just drop a like on YouTube, rate us on Spotify. Please give a 5-star if you're willing and able, and also on Apple Podcasts, because it really, really helps us out.
Yeah,
I'm not sure exactly how it helps us because I have no idea how the Spotify or Apple algorithm works, but I hear it helps. So I know I'm not selling it well, but please help us.
You have so much conviction each time you're like, it does help us. It does really help us. But then
I'm just copying what I've heard from other podcasts because they say it really helps. So I'm like, I think it does help.
Oh, okay.
It must if they're saying it.
I believe it.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you guys as always, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Bye.
Coming on Friday. Bye.
Bloopers.
It's bloopers.
Should we leave some parting words of wisdom or something?
Yes, we should.
Yeah.
We should. Am I supposed to do it?
Oh,
Can you say that again? Because I was talking over you, and then I want that joke to land. But
what did I say?
You said. Wait.
You don't even remember the joke.
Wait, let me ask you the question again.
Yeah.
What's the question? What was I gonna say?
Just this motion. You told me this, and I bring it back forward.
Oh, actually, that is your rizz. I should do an episode on like rizz.
Rizz, what would we talk about? You'd have to lead the class. I'm like the anti-rizz master.
No, I feel like you have more to teach about rizz than I do. My rizz is being a girl. I feel like in life, being a girl is enough rizz.
You should zoom in at my and then do that sound effect. Yeah.
I don't know what this episode has come to. I literally can't even remember what the topic is.
It's the fear of growing up. You know what? Maybe we'll just figure out the title in post.
We'll just rework the title.
I think when it comes to family, the fear of growing up can turn into a fear of aging in general. Mm-hmm. I think because... I'm just going with this.
This episode should just be bloopers.